Today we're going to be reading a book called A Silly Story, Snowy Day, and it's by Michael Coleman. And we're going to work on our skills of making inferences. And remember, when we talk about making inferences, it means that we use the text clues, which is what the author says, the schema, which is knowledge we already know, and then we use these two and combine it to make an inference. Okay, so that's the formula for making inference. And this book is about a tortoise named Shelley. See the picture? And her experience out on a cold winter day. And in the story, Shelley's family is about to go to sleep for the winter, and Shelley doesn't want to go to sleep. So we're going to find out what happens to Shelley when her parents fall asleep. And before we start reading, let's look over some of the new vocabulary words in the book. So if you could turn to page 4, and if you would put your finger, point to the word ridiculous. And this is a word that means that it doesn't make sense. It means silly, funny. And they use this word throughout the whole story, so you'll see it a lot. And if you could turn to page 8 and point to the word lumber. And lumbered is another way of saying to move clumsily or heavily. So she lumbered along. She moved heavily along. Turn to page 11 and point to the word cross. And cross is another way of saying angry. So she was feeling a little cross, a little angry. Now go to page 14 and find the word trudged for me. Trudged. And point to the word trudged. And trudged means to walk heavily. So Shelley trudged toward the top of the hill. She walked heavily toward the top of the hill. Now the last word is on page 16. And if you could point to the word miserable. And miserable is another way of saying unhappy. So Shelley felt cold and miserable. Shelley felt cold and unhappy. Okay? So let's go back to talking about making inferences, and we're going to look at this formula again. And you're going to use your text clues, and you're going to use your schema, which is knowledge you already know, to make an inference. So before we begin reading, let's write down on our notebook paper that we have in front of us facts that we already know about tortoises and how they live. So tell me what you think. How do they live? Do they live in the hot or cold environments?
They live in the hot.
They live in hot environments. That's very, very good. So write that down on your note paper. What's your schema? Knowledge you already know. Yes.
They live in water.
They live in water is very, very good. That's stuff you already know. Okay. Now let's look at the cover. We're going to look at our text clues, what the author tells us. And it says, a silly, snowy day. So using what we already know and using our text clues, what inferences can we make? What do we know? What can we use from the text clues and what we already know to make an inference about what might happen? Yes.
Shelley, even though he's a tortoise, is in cold weather.
Yeah, so maybe the tortoise, maybe Shelley might not fit in with the cold winter time. Maybe she'll have a different experience being outside in the cold. Very, very good. Okay, so what I want you guys to do, we just went over the vocab and we went over our formula. I'd like you to begin reading silently to yourselves, and when you get to page 7, if you could please stop, okay? Okay, good job on getting to page 7. So if you'll look at page 7, I'm going to use the formula and I'm going to model how I'm going to make an inference. So on page 7, what I just read, using the text clues, is that Shelley wants to go outside, and then she just went out through the hole in the shed. What I know with my schema is that when I explore something new, I'm not sure what to expect, but I'm really excited to learn the new things. So I'm going to infer that Shelley will see a different perspective on the wintertime and that she may not have expected. So I read that she wants to go outside. I know that I'm not sure what to expect, so I'm going to infer that she is going to be excited about whatever she learns, whatever new things she learns. Okay? So if you could please continue reading silently like you've been doing, and when you get to page 16, you'll please stop. Alright, you should be on page 16 right now, and we're going to make an inference using the things we just read in our schema, and text clues in our schema. Okay, so what are some of the things in your text clues that the author gave you that you just read? What are some things? Yes.
Shelley can't run around like a dog to get warm.
Very good. You just read that she can't run around like the dog. Good job.
Shelley can't fly away somewhere warm.
Very, very good. Okay. Now let's think about different ideas that we already know. Let's use our schema. So how would you feel if you found out that maybe you didn't have the traits to survive during the winter time like Shelley? What would you start to think if you were in that situation?
I wouldn't want to die because I was cold.
You wouldn't want to die because you're cold. Okay, good.
I would want to go home.
You want to go home. Very, very good. I would want to go home too. Okay. Yes, yes.
And Shelley knows that her parents were right.
Yes, very, very good. So now that we've looked at the text clues and we've used our schema, what can we infer using these two pieces of information is going to happen? What can we infer from our text clues and from our schema?
Shelley will go back home where it's warm.
Yeah, we can probably infer that she knows she can't survive, and she's probably going to want to go home. We can probably infer from that. Very, very good. Okay, now if you could just finish up reading the rest of the story. You're almost done, and then we'll go from there. Alright, good job on reading the whole story. So I'm just going to ask you guys a few questions that we've talked about and we discussed through our guided reading today. How do we make an inference? We talked about this throughout the day. What's the formula we use to come up with an inference? And I'll help you. Yes.
We use what the author told us in the book.
Yes, we use our text clues, which is what the author writes and tells us.
We use what we already know.
Yes, we use our schema, which is the knowledge we already know. Good job. And together we combine that and we make our
Inference.
Inference. Good job. Okay, so I'm just going to review what we worked on today. At the beginning of the session, we talked about our formula and how to make an inference. And before we began reading the story, we came up with a list of knowledge we already know about the tortoise, our schema, and then we used our text clues on the cover page to make an inference about Shelley's adventure. And so throughout the story, we also made several inferences about Shelley's actions using our formula. We also learned new vocabulary that we went over, so that's stuff that we will use in the future. So now I'm going to give you your assignment, and what you're going to do is I'm going to give you your paper, and you're going to